So I'll just introduce you. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. And welcome to our 11th speaker of the CELC Invited Speaker Series. So today we're fortunate to have Dr. Radhika Jaidev. Is it Jaidev?
Jaidev, yeah. Dave, it's okay, yeah.
Dave with us, who is giving a talk entitled Towards Facilitating the Transfer of Academic and Communication Skills. Radhika is very well known at the CLC, and she's spent many years here as a senior lecturer, and she's now director at the Center for Communication Skills at SIT, the Singapore Institute of Technology. Radhika drives SIT's communicating across the curriculum instruction, as well as the writing in the disciplines workshop series for SIT faculty. Radhika's research interests include writing transfer to the workplace and embedded instruction. And Radhika was part of an international team investigating writing transfer in work integrated learning from 2019 to 2021, organized by Elon University's Center for Engaged Learning and Teaching in North Carolina. And Radhika and her team have published findings from this project in several platforms. Please give a warm welcome to Radhika.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks a lot for that. Yeah. Okay, so I'll keep this very relaxed and sort of since we've got a small group here, and basically what I'm going to do today is to share with you something that we've done at SIT for the Center for Communication Skills, basically because we were faced with a problem and we felt that something needed to be done about it. And so, yeah, let me begin with that, and we just move on. Okay, so I'll start with a little bit of a background on what we were doing before we realized that we needed a change going forward. So historically, the Center for Communication Skills offered communication instruction in 4 ways. We had the standalone modules, 2 of them basically. The first one being technical writing and effective communication. And this was the module that basically dealt with academic literacies. Your paragraph development, your writing of the reader response kind of critical reading, that sort of thing, proposal writing, presentation skills, and so on. And then we offered another module called career and professional development, which dealt mainly with job search skills. That had to do, in fact, what we taught in that was basically just resume, application letters, and interview skills. So those were the 2 modules that we offered to programs. But the point is that they were not offered in all of the programs. Career and professional development was because it kind of acted as a kind of a requirement for students before they went on what we call the integrated work study program, which is the extended internship. So students needed to apply for the jobs. So the CPD was offered almost in all of the programs, but not the technical writing and effective communication, which is an interesting thing. We also offered embedded instruction in content modules in a few programs based on requests from content faculty. And we called it communicating across the curriculum because it was not only writing that we embedded, we also embedded presentation skills, as well as certain other types of things like meeting minutes and things like that. I'll explain a little bit more later. We also started the CCS Helpdesk, which is an online reservation system that students could use to book a slot for consultation. And at that time, it was CCS faculty that was sort of, assigned a student who had difficulty. And it was like a one-on-one tuition kind of thing that we did. We sort of factored it into our teaching hours. We also had 1 or 2 e-micro modules on grammar, academic writing related grammar, things like that, which came with self-check activities. So this was the scene before, up until about 2019 or so, right till the end. It's important for me to say that the technical writing and effective communication modules, as I mentioned earlier, was not offered in all of the programs. In SIT, we have our own SIT programs. We also have joint degree programs with universities overseas. So even some of the SIT programs themselves didn't have this TWEC module at that time, let alone some of the joint degree programs. So a little bit about the CPD module. People from the Center for Career Readiness accompanied us, the CCS faculty, when it came to the interview assessment, because we felt that it was useful to have them there because they had contacts, they had sort of a finger on the pulse of what was going on in the industry. So they joined us when we conducted the interview assessment. So this was basically what happened up until late 2019. Why the need for change, particularly with the technical writing and effective communication? I'm going to talk mainly about that, not so much about the career and professional development, because that's going back to the Career Readiness Center for Career Readiness. We thought it would be best for them to deal with that because they're involved in preparing students to go into their IWSP and so into the workplace and so on. Although we have a little bit of involvement there too, which I can explain later. But I'm focusing more on the technical writing and effective communication. So problems with this module was that not all programs had that in the first place. And at that time, the decision whether or not to have technical writing and effective communication module was largely in the hands of the program leaders of the various degree programs. And it was dependent on whether they had space and time in their content curriculum. Also, the TWEC modules comprised different language elements based on what the program leaders felt their students needed. So some of them had, started from paragraph development into summary writing, into synthesis of sources from information from various sources. Some of them had literature review, some didn't. So it was kind of like a hodgepodge of different things. They were taught in different years. So some students in some programs could actually have this TWEC module long after they'd done most of their content assignments, sometime in like late second year or something like that. And I think 1 or 2 of them even in early third year. And, students used to ask us, why didn't we have this earlier? And it could have saved us so much of heartache, over their assignments and so on. So, yeah, so basically it was included in the curriculum where content professors felt they could fit it in. The other problem was that like I said, it varied in many ways, including the time for each of the TWEC modules, which ranged from 6 weeks. Actually, I think I've taught on one which was even 4 weeks to 20 weeks, often requiring CCS tutors to cover the same number of topics regardless of time and administer 3 to 5 assignments regardless of the length of the module. Can you imagine, administering 3 assignments in a module that's over 6 weeks? You're testing more than you're teaching most of the time. And it's, it was, I didn't want to say it, but quite ridiculous actually. Students' ability to write their content assignments and capstone projects, honors dissertations was widely disparate as a result. Even students who had taken the TWEC module in year 1 or year 2 were not competent writers of capstone projects and honors dissertations, which were very heavily, credited in sort of in terms of grades and so on. It accounted for a lot in their in those years that they took them, and also the reflective reports on their work attachments in years 2 and 3. Students have to come back from their IWSP and write a fairly substantial reflective report on how they had, applied their content knowledge at work, what were some of the issues, etc. And we found that, students were unable to do this properly. The next thing was feedback from practitioners in different industries. I'm going to share with you some of the interviews that we conducted. CCS, some of us CCS faculty went out and interviewed industry practitioners from a number of different industries. I'm only sharing a few with you. I think we did about 12 interviews in all. If you look at the first one from Victor, who was at the time with Clean Tech Solar. He's since moved on to Blue Leaf Energy, still in the solar energy field. He said, we need in our industry ability to read and analyze content and then explain it in writing and speech to somebody, clearly a client or a superior or someone. They may be asked to research something and then present it to me in a summary, clearly and simply laid out, and it has to be useful, of course. So, filtering out important information was part of that deal. John Yao is actually now a faculty member at SIT, but has vast experience working in the chemical engineering field in India, in the Middle East, and so on, and Malaysia as well. And he said, documentation writing is needed. Writing of installation operation manuals, explaining the problem and what you are doing to troubleshoot in very simple terms to the client who may not be an engineer. So that was important. So you're talking about audience here. Who are you actually talking about your content to? And then we spoke to Tek Soon, Dean of the LTA Academy. A person's strong communication skills will stand out due to his or her ability to articulate his ideas. If the person is hardworking, but communication skills is just okay, it will tell. I think he was talking about career advancement here. And then we had a very interesting interview with Tracy Carol Iyer, who's the group chief nurse of SingHealth Singapore General Hospital. She said, nurses are often unable to write succinctly, especially when reporting patient status to doctors. They need training in writing, reader-centered, complete documents, what has been done and what other stakeholders need to know. Being digital natives, they need to be taught how to write formal texts devoid of social media lingo, your BRB and the BTW and whatever. Nurses routinely write incident reports in their course of work. Doctors often complain that the reports contain too much information. So knowing how to be concise, again, filtering out what's important depending on whom you're writing to. So nurses need to be taught how to select relevant information and write it concisely. Then we spoke to Andy Kusumo, a scientific director of Mond Nissin Private Limited. They make noodles, they make, you may have seen Quorn, Quorn. It's available in NTUC, FairPrice, and so on. It's a plant-based, meat substitute. You may have seen it. Comes in like an orange pack. He said, in fact, they take our students for IWSP. Some of our students actually work there. They're able to develop good slides for their presentations, but lack audience awareness when they present. They also do not see the value of understanding the big picture of their presentation and seem to work in silos. And finally, Neeraj. Neeraj is CEO of Zmart. They develop smart solutions like apps and so on for the food and beverage industry. In fact, they've come up with a very interesting app, which is basically enables chefs to order their raw materials from various different providers through the app. and there's a record of what you've ordered in the past so that you can keep track of how much you need, etc., etc. So it was very interesting talking to him. He said the ability to grasp what's going on, be able to study and understand the bigger picture, pay attention to the verbals and non-verbals, not just of themselves as they are presenting or talking, but of the other party, the potential client, and jump at opportunities when they present themselves. If they're not paying attention to the communication, they wouldn't be able to grab the opportunity. So all of these, all of this feedback from various practitioners, again, got us thinking along what we should do to sort of revamp the entire way in which we were designing and delivering our modules and what more we could do. So our teaching of writing and presentation skills, we felt, could no longer be designed for or projected as being purely for survival at university, to manage academic assignments, because our university, we call ourselves an applied university, applied learning university. So basically, right from day one, students are sort of prepped to be able to go out into the workforce, to take their knowledge and to be able to sort of, hit the road running, whether it's during the IWSP or once they finish. Of course, they should be even more prepared. The module, again, also had to be delivered such that students could see the extended value writing and presenting clearly and purposefully to suit specific audiences and contexts could have. We needed to find a way to reduce the perceived dichotomy between academic literacies for university and professional communication for the workplace, because we found that many students felt that, okay, TWEC is something you need for survival at university. You take it as a module, you're done with it, that's it. It's whatever 5 credit modules, modular credits or whatever it is, and then it's over. You take the CPD module to get a job, for the IWSP, and maybe later to get into the workforce once you graduate, and that's it, it's done. So we wanted to change that. We needed to help students to understand the communication knowledge and skills we teach them at university extends way beyond it to the workplace and further for career advancement. Quite similar to content knowledge, because content knowledge is something that they knew they needed when they went out to work. Of course, they build upon it, and the way they apply it varies depending on which sort of industry they go into. Not everyone goes into the specific industry that they train for, but still the content knowledge is something that they view as something that they can use beyond university. But we felt not so with the communication skills we teach them. So we knew we had to do something about that. But that got us thinking, and we realized that we actually need to help students to connect the dots through a holistic curriculum in which they could experience in a concrete manner how their writing and speaking could and needed to be repurposed, recontextualized, and repackaged, depending on whether they were communicating their content for a university assignment or at work for a senior colleague, as was mentioned by one of the practitioners earlier that we interviewed, a supervisor, or a potential investor. We needed to find a way to consciously facilitate the transfer of writing and presentation knowledge and skills through university to the point when they would enter the workplace. And we needed students to also realize this slowly. Obviously, we could not do this with just one module in year 1, because everything that they learn is going to be forgotten, the moment they're done with it. So how do we continue with this whole process of, thinking about communication, how we can recontextualize, how we need to repurpose, how the same skills that you've learned can be repackaged for various different audiences, different purposes, different contexts. So, changes going forward. From academic year 2021-22, it's quite recent actually, because it took me a while to put up the paper, convince senior management and so on, whose support we got. We've started to offer a new 4-credit, 48-hour, 12-week module, which emphasizes critical thinking in writing and speaking in year 1. In all the undergraduate programs, regardless of whether it's SIT or a joint degree program. So it's a university core requirement now. Why? And what does this have to do with scaffolding students' ability to communicate their disciplinary content at university and beyond? Particularly, I'm talking about why emphasize critical thinking. Well, 2 quotes here that helped us understand it. Hyland argues that the depth and extent of our understanding of our own disciplines becomes expressly clear in the way we write or speak about it, as it is through language that academics and students conceptualize their subjects and argue their claims persuasively. So in a sense, it's like knowledge construction and transformation here that happens. There's a lot of literature out there that all of you are familiar with, how writing helps students, all of us, to do that. Of course, Paul and Elder, critical thinkers, are clear as to the purpose at hand and the question at issue. They question information, conclusions, and points of view. They strive to be clear, accurate, precise, and relevant. In fact, all of these are there in the intellectual standards that I'll show you in a minute, that I'm sure you're also familiar with. They seek to think beneath the surface, to be logical and fair. They apply these skills to their reading and writing, as well as to their speaking and listening. I'll be very honest and say that at the time of conceptualizing this module, I was thinking, myself and a couple of others, we were thinking of various different models, the Tolman model and even Halpern, I think, different models of critical thinking. But we found that the Paul Elder model kind of suited our purpose quite well, particularly for engineering students, you know, anything to do with science, technology, IT students, and so on. Also, if you are familiar with the Washington State University project, which took place around 2001, they identified 7 elements of critical thinking that they viewed as being standard across university programs. And these include the following: problem identification, which students have to do regularly, you know, whatever project that they're working on. The establishment of a clear perspective on the issue, recognition of alternative perspectives, to get a balance and to know about what's going on with, you know, other studies and so on. Identification of context, identification and evaluation of evidence, to check veracity and so on. Recognition of fundamental assumptions, implicit or stated by the representation of an issue. To know what the assumptions are, whether they're valid, you know, false assumptions, what is it? Assessment of implications and potential conclusions. So it kind of helped us to decide that, you know, we'll use, of course, it's not cast in stone, but it serves our purpose very well to use the Paul Elder critical thinking framework. If you look at some of these, I'll show you a few of these slides. They deal with knowledge, defining the main topic that needs to be covered. So looking at this, we could see that we can easily incorporate this into our teaching of writing and presentation skills. You know, whether you understand the issue through researching the topic, have you researched it adequately in the first place in order to comprehend it thoroughly? Have you analyzed the data? You know, solution of the problem or the issue investigated, discussing that. Synthesis, turn the solution into an implementable action or plan. You know, what can you do beyond? You know, you come up, you identify the problem and you've studied the issue. So how do you improve on it? And then evaluating it, testing and evaluation and solution. And we found that these are the skills that they need when they go out to do their final year, when they go on to do their final year project, their capstone, and so on and so forth. So regardless of, which program here at SIT especially, we found that it would be very, very useful. And we introduced this model actually to students in all of the critical thinking and communicating modules that we offer to the various programs. There's a formal, I wouldn't call it a template, but there's certain things that we do in the module across all programs, and this is one of them, actually introducing them to this critical thinking framework. Customization, yes, we do, depending on whether we're teaching mechanical engineering or chemical engineering or whatever it is, but that is in the form of the scenarios, the problems, the kind of texts that we use, and so on and so forth. That's where we customize. But we introduce all of them to this. And this particular, the elements of reasoning or thought come in very, very handy. When we teach them these labels, we found that we've piloted this, the CTC in 4 programs now. And we found that by the time they get to about week 4, week 5, when they're working on the proposal, they're actually using these labels in their brainstorming sessions, in their group discussions, and so on. So we found that very useful for them to know, because we want them to be equipped with this knowledge to do it, reapply it every time they go on to do some other project, even in their content subjects and so on, disciplines and so on. So it's been useful. And again, here, a little bit more about, teaching. It lends a certain rigor to the process of expressing content, exploring and expressing content. So they're all familiar with this, that, you have to have a very clear purpose. The clarity is important. And the fact that, let me just go back to this. Let me show you the questions that come with this. Yes. So from here, when we go on from this part, we go on to show them these questions. They can be adapted, of course. So they are very, very useful, I find, because students then start to look in terms of, is it clear enough? Even in the peer review part, is what the peer has written, is it clear? Does it need further elaboration? Do they need to illustrate it further, etc., all the way? So we felt we could use this even to sort of, incorporate it into the peer review checklist. And that helped because they were all talking the same language to evaluate their own work. And of course, we deal with the foundational aspects of writing as well, to help them concretize these ideas and thoughts in their writing. So before I talk about that, we also looked at, when we were designing the modules, we used what is known as understanding by design or backward curriculum design to contextualize. Remember I mentioned that, the scenarios, the types of genre especially needed to be contextualized. So some program leaders, when we spoke to them, felt that, they would need to do a literature review. Some others felt that they need to be able to do this kind of a proposal, a design proposal, which is slightly different from some other kind of proposal. So for the integrated media, digital communication and integrated media students, the program leaders said that we would like them to be able to do like an advertising proposal. So these are this is where the backward curriculum design questions helped us a lot. So these were questions that we addressed with discipline faculty when we designed the modules. What are the typical problems and questions that surface in that discipline? What are the criteria they use to define good responses to those questions? And here we're thinking about later capstone, dissertations, FYP, and so on. How much data is considered adequate when supporting a claim? So what this process does for us is that we can speak with some authority when we're teaching them the CTC module which is delivered in year 1, and say that this is something you're going to need when you do your capstone, when you do your FYP, when you go out to work for your IWSP, if you're asked to do something, blah, 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 whatever it is, you know, be involved in writing a user manual or whatever it is. So that gives us a sense of sort of authority, you know, and students actually listen to this, because that's what we found in the pilot programs anyway, that, you know, they take note of it because, okay, I need it in my next trimester when I'll be doing an advertising proposal or whatever. So all these questions, what are the methods and kinds of evidence they use to address them? Quantitative, qualitative, balance of both. How is this evidence best shown? What kinds of visuals do they need to provide detailed descriptions? Who are the typical stakeholders in the profession? And so on. So we felt that this actually helps us to help students to connect the dots, to see the value of what we're doing now in year 1, in year 2, year 3, year 4, when they graduate and out to work. So this approach helps us to induct students into the rhetorical situations: exigence, audience, genre, reflection, knowledge, context, discourse, community, and purpose of their disciplines. And so we thought it was quite valuable. Just to sort of give you an idea, an example of the kind of critical thinking activities we use for writing. This is something that was developed by Brad. All of you know Brad, for the robotics program. So here the activity, and I taught with him on this robotics program, we got students to read a student written summary, reader response, and annotate it in a way that helps the student who's doing this, you know, to evaluating it, to understand it. So they read this and with a partner review the above essay with aspects of the PE, Paul Elder framework, using the questions I showed you. All right, so how does the text fare in terms of the 10 PE standards of thinking, the clarity, accuracy, etc., etc. So they evaluate it and they look at, you know, whether, you know, it actually passes muster in that sense. So one example, and we give them this framework to actually write their responses. This is an example. Again, I taught on this module with Nazreen, whom you all know, and Eric, whom you also know. Digital communication and integrated media. Students may have to do at work is an advertising proposal, so which sets out an advertising agency's recommendations for an advertising campaign. So we designed an assignment, actually Nazreen designed the materials on sustainable development using the Singapore Green Plan 2030 as a basis. And in groups of 3 and 4, they watch the video on the Singapore Green Plan, read the information on the website, choose one key program, and then they use these questions from the PE framework. What is the purpose of the initiatives? They were supposed to choose one program and recommend a better way to advertise this, to have a bigger reach of the population, you know, to get their buy-in into the Singapore Green Plan. So these were the questions that students had to discuss and then present, share the findings with the class. So 2 examples. Of course, the module also incorporates, it leads into the foundational skills like selecting key points when reading and reviewing discipline-specific articles, paragraph development, unity, text flow, summarizing, paraphrasing, combining and synthesizing information, using the right connectors, etc. So we have 48 hours and we meet the students twice a week for 2 hours each time. So there's enough time, there's adequate time to do all of this. And the focus, a lot of the focus of this module is on writing. And then we also do some presentation skills at the end, where we teach them the usual, I mean, the verbals, non-verbals, so on. And it's usually pegged to the proposal that they write. So that's basically the kind of module that we're doing. I wanted to show this to you Avinash is a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Purdue University. And this was, again, I thought very useful. He wrote a letter to the editor, and it's on the Purdue website, actually, sort of supporting language teachers like us. The best of these students, he's talking about STEM students, are well conversant with the formulas, equations, and computer programs that implement those formulas and equations, because that's what STEM education is about. But when you ask these students to explain what they know without using too much technical jargon, they become inarticulate. Exactly the same thing happens if you try to engage such students in a conversation about how they might take the current state of the art to the next level. And then he goes on a little bit more here. And this is the part I want to sort of draw your attention to, where he talks about constructing mental narratives. If a student, if as a student you're severely lacking in the more humanistic aspects of your education, it's going to be difficult for you to construct mental narratives, let alone spoken and written narratives, about where you want to go with what you know today, about the directions in which you would want to push the current state of the knowledge. So this is, again, something that I thought which was very, very useful, because I thought that that's what we should be doing. We should be helping them to the mental narratives that they may have. I mean, that content professors are probably doing this, getting them to think about, their proof of concept and things like that they're working on. But our job is to help them to convert that, or, to sort of convey that into the right kind of language, written or spoken, so that they can use that to advance themselves in their professions. So that brings me to the next stage. As I said earlier, that one module in year one is not going to help facilitating transfer. So I started to think about, what more we can do with the embedding that we had already started doing with my predecessor, Dr. Deng Sudong. I think many of you know him. He started the TWEC module. He set up the CCS actually at the time. And then he actually started work on the communicating across the curriculum. And when I came on the scene, he asked me to take over and, manage that. So I was doing a lot of work, embedding work, and so thinking a lot about what more we can do. So Ivanic talks about students being unable to talk about how they might take the current state of the art to the next level, how it's difficult for them to construct mental narratives, let alone spoken and written narratives. And I mentioned this to you earlier. So I felt that here he was actually referring to the communication skills that are essential, not just to manage their capstone or final year project presentations. That's important, of course, for graduation, but something that's needed beyond the university for professional development and advancement. So again, what more can we do beyond the one communication module in year one? And that's when I decided that we need an integrated approach to teaching communication. It became clear at that point that we couldn't have several separate modules that handled academic literacy and professional communication throughout students' programs for two reasons. Resource constraints, especially time and manpower. I'll say a little bit about that because here at SIT, our students have 3 trimesters. Instead of the 2 that NUS and NTU have, and SMU as well, I think. Why? Because the decision made by senior management was to help students to graduate faster, especially since the majority of them, 97% of them, come from the polys where they've spent 3 years getting their diploma. And the boys, again, have done a further 2 years with NS. So we wanted, I think the plan was to offer them an opportunity to graduate and enter the workforce faster, as fast as possible. So it's a compressed kind of a degree. So definitely there's a constraint in terms of time. And of course, manpower. Every organization has this, how many people can you hire to do the job? So, and more importantly, emphasizing the dichotomy between academic literacies and professional communication, which for the longest time we've been sort of teaching, separately. There are differences, of course, but it didn't necessarily help students to see the lifelong value of communication modules that they take at university, I felt. When you talk to students, they always tell you that it's like a module you take in school, and then, you go out and you work, and then you discover at some point that, maybe some of the things that I learned in university might be useful now, but by that time it's too late because we haven't actually, scaffolded the connecting of the dots for them. So instead, I felt it might serve students better if we connected the dots for them by teaching them to analyze purposes, audiences, and contexts for writing and speaking, and to understand the relationships between expectations for writing and speaking, and those purposes, audiences, and contexts, as this is likely to help them develop abilities and dispositions that will lead to successful transfer. And that's Adler-Kastner. So I thought, yeah, that's a good idea, really. We should be doing this and emphasizing this throughout our CTC and the embedded work that we're doing with them. Just to sort of, jog your memory about what we saw a little bit earlier. And this is the interview that with John Yao. Sometimes engineers have to go out with marketing managers to meet clients. So communication skills become extremely important. For example, if they need to explain upstream oil and gas process technology, how to convert raw materials into the product. So speaking and writing involved here. As an engineer who works in oil and gas, you may be invited by the Institution of Engineers to give a presentation to members of the public. They need public speaking skills, and there may be non-engineers in the audience. So audience again. Documentation writing, writing of installation operation manual, explaining the problem and what you're doing to troubleshoot has to be explained in very simple terms to the client who may not be an engineer, who may not even have, university qualifications. Sometimes it's a possibility. So, you might have to explain it, in very basic terms. Communicating with older colleagues when engineers go to the site. They have to work with operators who may be much older, very experienced people, have been on the job for 30 years. So fresh engineers need to be humble, helpful, learn from them, but also speak. Sometimes they may be speaking only the local language, so knowing that would be useful. That's another thing, of course, but at least in simpler terms. So embedding, so what we decided was that, okay, we're going to embed for sure. We'd already started doing this. So how are we going to do this to scale it up across the programs and to do more of this and follow up on what we've been doing in the critical thinking and communicating module? So embedding assignment-specific writing, presentation skills, or other kinds of communication, instruction, and follow-up consultation in at least one content module per academic year. This was presented to the Board of Studies and passed. So they decided to institutionalize this, to say that every student must have at least one content module per academic year from year 2, because we're teaching them the critical thinking and communicating module in year 1. So to follow up on that from year 2 onwards. And this has to be in every undergraduate program to reiterate the communication knowledge and skills taught in year 1. And this will gradually be scaled up to one content module per trimester, which means that they'll have 3 opportunities per year from year 2, where we can actually jog their memories about what they've learned in the CTC. How can you apply this, recontextualize, repurpose, new audience, new genre, maybe new kind of, output at the end. So again, this required us to talk to content faculty to find out where they wanted to embed it, what kind of things what kind of writing outcomes that are they looking for, what kind of presentations do they want students to be able to do, and then scale it back or sort of feed that back into the designing of the materials for the CAC. That's the embedding part, assignment specific embedding that we do. Some examples of this for written instruction would be laboratory reports, systematic literature review or critical appraisal for nursing students. I've taught actually the systematic literature review for nursing students. It's very interesting to do actually. I've also done the spoken one on the requirements elicitation interview techniques for year 2. This is interesting. I learned from my colleague who teaches software engineers that is something where a lot of mistakes happen, because when software engineers talk to potential clients and find out information from them about their software needs for a particular software package, they don't always ask questions in the way that they should be asking. And of course, the client doesn't exactly know what's available or what exactly could help them to do their work better. So the kind of questions that the software engineers have to ask have to actually tease out this information so that they can go away and come up with a prototype for the client to look at and approve and maybe adjust, suggest adjustments and so on. It will make their lives much easier. So we designed a requirements elicitation interview techniques, embedding instruction specifically for software engineers. We also designed patient care interpersonal communication for year 2 nursing students. And then, of course, we partner with content faculty for final year project or design presentations, also for their IWSP presentations. When students come back from their 8 months to 1 year attachment, they do a presentation on what they've taken away from that job. So we partner, we sit in with the content faculty and we actually grade them as well. We don't do any grading of the writing because we don't have the bandwidth to do that. So content faculty do the grading of the written assignments, but we do help them in designing the assessment rubrics for the writing and help them, to look out for these things when you're reading your assignment. So these are the kinds of embedding that we do. Right. So ensuring that everyone plays a part in connecting the dots. All programs have to submit a comment. So, all right, let me give you a little bit of information about that. Another thing that we felt, and we discussed this at the Board of Studies level, is that it's not just the communication tutors or teachers who are responsible for students' ability to speak and write well. It's everybody's responsibility. Because your students are, they carry your brand and they go out to work. So if they can't communicate their content properly, it doesn't only reflect on the communication lecturers, it reflects on the whole university. So as part of this whole holistic approach, the integrated approach, we discussed this at the highest level, and we said that, and the provost actually requested that all content program leaders come up with a communication skills plan that captures the kind of follow-up communication instruction that their students will be needing all the way till they graduate. I can share this with you. Oops, no, I didn't do that well. Let me see. Maybe I can share this with you. It's supposed to, I think I need to go out of the presentation mode. Let me see. Show you this. Yeah, so this was something that I crafted and sent out to them. So this is something that program content professors need to fill out and give to us. where writing is concerned, what are the characteristics of academic writing in this program? What writing abilities should students be able to demonstrate while in the program? And going all the way to the profession by the time they graduate, etc. Speaking, same thing with speaking. So yeah, and then we capture everything in this kind of a sort of a table: communication skill type, module, code for the various, where are we embedding it, which module are we embedding it in the program, what kind of instruction do you want us to do, consultation, does it need to have a follow-up consultation? For the spoken part, we don't do assessment for writing, but for the spoken part, assessment, etc., date, time, total number of groups, etc. So communication plan like this. We also do embedding in the back to campus. When students come back from their integrated work study program for a few weeks in the middle, we run workshops for them on interpersonal skills, email writing, meeting minutes, etc. So all of this is captured so that there's a kind of a plan that we have for every program. So let me close this now. Go back to this. Okay. Okay. Can you still see this? Can I hear from Mark? Can you see this? Am I sharing this? You can.
Yeah, we can see it very well. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm not really that savvy with this sometimes. The other thing that we did was to get the writing or the weighting. Minimum of 15% is assigned to the writing and presentation skills in the content assignments where the embedding is done. So let's say if we embed a writing instruction in a laboratory report, for example, up to 15% or more sometimes is of the value of that assignment. Sorry, 15% of the 100% of that assignment is weighted. Goes to the writing assessment, the writing or the presentation itself. And that's not all. CAC accounts for 3 credits in every academic year, beginning from year 2 of a student's undergraduate education at SIT. And this has to be captured in the module profile, which is uploaded in the internal system. So it helps that we get the support of senior management. So students also realize that, okay, I need to be careful. I need to actually take note of my writing and my presentation skills and learn whatever I can to do this well. So that helps, definitely. So, which brings me to, I think, the final slide. Potential advantages of an integrated pedagogical approach like this to teaching communication skills. A module in year 1 coupled with the CAC or the embedding that we do from year 2 onwards. These are just some of my thoughts. We often refer to communication skills as life skills. That's the way we approach the teaching of communication must drive home this message, that it's not just a module you take in year 1 or year 2. It's something that you really need for the rest of your career. Teaching one communication module in an entire university program does little to create that perception of a life skill. Content professors are perceived as conveyors of knowledge that is essential to students beyond university. They apply this information that they learn. They might adapt it. They might, grow it or, build upon it, but they use it and they realize the perception is that this is important information. We need to use it. As communication teachers, we too, I feel, provide an essential skill that would help students to convert those mental narratives about their content into written and spoken narratives, which is essential for their career advancement. And we need to help them see that, connect those dots for them. Facilitating transfer of any kind of learning, be it content or communication, I feel should be a whole university effort. By working closely with content faculty and involving them in planning the teaching and assessment of communication skills through students' degree programs, we are driving home an important message to students that how they articulate or convey their content in both writing and speaking is as important as the content itself. Which brings me to the end of my presentation. These are the references. Thank you very much. I shall stop sharing here. How long did I take? Oh my goodness, almost an hour.
That was very informative. Yes, very
I hope
extensive
so.
talk. Wonderful processes there that Radhika has been presenting to us. Okay, so as usual with this type of Zoom session, you're welcome to take the floor, or you're welcome to write in comments or questions in the chat.
Yeah.
And Radhika will answer those.
Yes.
So please feel free to.
Hi everybody. Now I can see everyone. Nina, how are you?
Surviving.
Aren't we all? Yeah.
I was, fascinated by the complexity of what you've been describing, working with all of these different faculties and different genres.
Yeah.
It's very complicated system, isn't it, that you've been describing? And so how much of that was in place when you took over, or have you been one of the main builders of that?
To be fair, Sudong had already started the CAC going, but at the time, it wasn't it hadn't been institutionalized. So we were actually knocking on doors to get buy-in from faculty that, I think your students need this, would you like to see if your students need it? And they would like that sort of thing. So it was a lot of, foot slogging going from, we're all here, many of us. So, but I have to say that many of them did see the value of it, but just were clueless as to how to manage it, where to embed it, because everyone was thinking along the lines of, oh, is it going to be another module? We don't have time for that. We're already so stretched with our content and the IWSP and blah, blah, blah. So, how are we going to manage this, that sort of thing. So the fact that we had the embedding already sort of, in place helped a lot. But I think what I helped to do was to sort of put up the papers to senior management and, run the workshops for faculty on the writing across the disciplines and writing in the disciplines, to see the value of this kind of thing, and why it is important for professional advancement for students to be able to carry this skill out with them and not see it as just one module that you complete, So that took a fair bit of work on my part. And luckily kind of, by the time we had management who saw the value of that. Yeah.
Just out of interest, I know that it's relatively new what you've been doing, but have you had a chance to speak to any graduates or any employers who have, seen application of the input?
We're actually carrying out a study at the moment, which has a grant, an internal grant supporting it, to do that, to look at some of the outcomes, to study the outcomes from students as well as faculty, and then beyond to employers as well. So we hope we'll get some positive feedback. Students at the moment have actually, in the pilot programs, they've come back and told us that, yeah, this is useful, that because we can use it in the, whatever it is that they're doing in next try. So we can see that. That has come through in the student feedback in the pilot programs we've run. But beyond that, we're still, collecting data to get, we'll have more to say at a later date.
I look forward. Are you going to publish it in a?
Definitely,
yeah.
Yes.
Look forward to reading that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Radhika. I have a question.
Tina.
I have a question. So I've been listening to how you've basically arranged the program in such a way that students feel the benefits right through their academic career and then move on to their careers. But one of the things that I guess is assumed in these programs is that you're teaching students how to communicate with different kinds of audiences. So with your peers, with your friend circles, with lower in command chain, with higher ups, things like that. So in the framework that you've offered, does it take into consideration, for example, I'm coming from a typically environmentally conscious kind of way of looking at things. So then how do you write for change, right? How do you write to empower people to change? Simple things like that. So does this framework that you're looking at, yes, it looks at critical thinking, but do you also engage with and teach students how to write for different kinds of audiences, or is that assumed because it's part of report writing or academic writing or things like that, defined by the subject rather than the audience?
One of the things that the provost wrote to me when I was designing this is to say that, see how you can incorporate the whole theme of sustainability into your module on top of everything else. And I said, okay, then given it some thought, and I thought that's not difficult really. So we did that actually, so that if you're talking about that sort of thing and sort of bringing about change for improvement, we've actually done that in the proposal assignment that students do. So for example, in the digital, I have to get my head around that whole name, Digital Communication and Integrated Media, okay, DCIM program, we got them to look at the Singapore Green Plan 2030. And in the process of designing their advertising proposal to improve on the advertising that the various ministries had already done, let's say using fewer plastic bags, or schools, sort of managing their electricity consumption and so on. Students actually had to come up with ideas on how to do this, where they brought in their content knowledge as well. And of course had to read and see. And so there was that element of change for improvement there. And we required them, although it was a bit difficult because of the time frame, to go and speak to, people within the university. There wasn't time for them to go out and talk to experts outside. But there are people here, professors, who actually do work, they research on conservation of various things. So go and conduct an interview with them, talk to them. So they show us their interview transcript, they show us their questions and say, okay, these are some of the questions we want to ask them. And then we say that, okay, first you need to talk about why you are asking these questions. How are you going to put that across to them? What are you going to use this information to do eventually? So that kind of a conversation. So I don't know whether that answers your question. So we did sort of expose them to that kind of thing. We try.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, and I understand where you're coming from. I was just wondering whether there was something specific in your program that gets students to be conscious of what kind of audience they are communicating to and what kind of skill set they need at that point in time. So a call out or a call for action versus calming someone down, to selling a product, to academic discussions on something. Right. So were they in your framework? Are they, have you taken into consideration audience is what I was looking at?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Because when we teach them, let's say, presentation skills, one of the things we emphasize, and which we should do a little bit more actually, is to sort of get them aware of the fact that you won't always be speaking to your specific community of practice. Even if they are engineers, they may not be chemical engineers. They may be, you know, environmental engineers or somewhere. And the way the world is going now, you know, a lot of large projects are interdisciplinary. So you are a team member working with, let's say, a doctor, you know, somebody from, you know, forestry research, somebody from some other kind of work, you know. So you need to be able to communicate your content to all of these different people and help them to understand that. So this is one of the things we do emphasize. But again, I have to say that, you know, there is just so much we can do within the 12 weeks. So which is why we sort of like to sort of carry on that work in the embedding.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We have a question in the chat.
Question from Mincha.
From Mincha.
May I know how the language and communication staff overcome the challenges of handling content knowledge? Yes, okay, very good question. We are often asked this actually. Okay, so basically, this is one of the reasons why we don't offer, of course, we don't have the bandwidth, we don't offer to mark or grade the final papers, the engineering papers or whatever it is, because we're looking for the language. We can't tell whether the formulas are correct, and you know, that's not what we do. We can't see if the math is correct and so on. So certainly we do need to have some knowledge of where they need, what they need to communicate, and to whom, who would be possible potential stakeholders, what kinds of, you know, genre this content would take eventually, and so on. And we come in there, we help them with that part, but we don't actually delve into the actual content itself as deeply as, you know, it makes the whole process nerve-wracking for us. But it does involve a fair bit of homework on our parts. So for example, like when I have done this a few times, had to teach systematic literature review to nursing students, my homework informed me that it's quite different from the kind of literature reviews we write. As in their work, they have to actually look at every single clinical study that has ever been done in, let's say, you know, diabetes or whatever it is, and talk about that in a summarized form before they come to. So it's a huge, actually, chunk of whatever paper they're writing. So this is important. And critical appraisal that they do. Again, this is like new information for us when we do the embedding structure. But the way we look at it is that, you know, it helps us to expand our repertoire as well. So if we call ourselves communication experts, then it's because we are exposed to all of these different ways that writing and speaking takes form in. You know, of course, we're not there yet. We're sort of slowly, incrementally getting there. But it gives you a good feeling that, you know, you're not just limited to one kind of area. So that helps. I don't know whether that answers your question, Mincha.
That kind of brings up the question that I wanted to ask about when you showed us the Word document and you had the table.
Yeah.
So in the first column, you had all the different genres. And then in the next column, you had the different disciplines. And I was just going to ask, you know, as a linguist, do you see any significant differences in genres across faculties? So you've just mentioned about literature reviews. Have you noticed any other significant differences in the genres?
Sometimes in the way that they express certain things, you know, like, in fact, even in the way that they use citation, like the IEEE is quite different, isn't it? In the way that it actually comes out in a journal article than the APA convention that we use. Because all they have is a numbering system there. And, you know, so they write it like as if it's part of their own thinking. when in fact it is actually some information from a different study. So these are a lot of, there are differences definitely in the way they express their ideas and so on. That's another area for research, I have to say, that I would love to go into a little bit more in detail.
And do you teach the faculties that you work with? Do you teach them genre theory and genre pedagogy? Do you explain that to them, or do they already have a kind of understanding of it based on their own progressions in their career?
I haven't actually done, but when I do the WID faculty workshops, the writing in the disciplines, this is something that I touch on, explaining to them that, there is such a thing, because they're all familiar with their own ways of writing and not with others. So yeah, it's something that I bring up, but I haven't actually done a lecture. That's a good idea, though. Maybe I should. Talking to them about genre theory. Yeah. We have a very active equivalent of CDTL here, co-lead, and they're very receptive. They like to get people from different fields to come and share their views on different things that can be used across, disciplines, that would be interesting to people across disciplines. So a number of our CCS faculty have actually shared, and we had Chris Bedwell talking about writing in accounting, because he's got a CA as well. So I think that went down very well. So we do that. Co-lead is quite friendly with CCS in that way.
Okay, I've got a question.
Sarah, hi.
Yeah, thank you so much for the sharing. I find this very fascinating. In line with what you mentioned just now, in terms of the citations, do you actually go about standardizing? Like, do you stipulate the one that, like, for them to use just one, or do you allow them to use different ones? And the other question I have is, like, whether there are or there were some challenges that you've encountered in implementing this when you wrote this out. Were there some challenges that you could share with us?
Yeah, the first question about the type of citation conventions, we usually check with the program leads. This is where the preliminary homework happens. What kind of citation convention would you like us to teach them? So a lot of times they'll tell us that, oh, APA is good, but maybe you can teach them IEEE as well. So, we teach them the IEEE, but for our particular purpose for the proposal, we'll tell them to stick to APA. We teach them how to use the APA, and we get them to use it as well. But we do actually teach them other, depending on whether the program leaders want us to. Yeah, and for the second question, did I face any, I think I got lucky there. When you have the support of the provost and the president to do something like this, it's useful because, then they're kind of on your team, helping to get other people to see your viewpoint, that our students really need this. So yes, but of course they were quite clear that we can't offer 5 different modules, communication modules across years. So what can you do to circumvent this problem? So that's where I had to go and crack my head and come up with, okay, here's what we've been doing in a small way, but if you help us to institutionalize it, and here's my suggestion on how we can do this, this will work. I think this will work. And then they said, yeah, okay, that sounds interesting. And, and then of course I had to present it to the entire board, and they saw the value of that. So yeah, it took some convincing. That's what you're asking me. And the fact that, I had already been doing the faculty presentations, faculty workshops, on how it's useful to teach writing within the discipline, that helped to get some buy-in as well. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Letitia's raised a hand to ask a question.
Yeah. Hi, Letitia.
Hello, hi Radhika. Thank you so much. Really so rich, that presentation. So it's so helpful.
So
The process really very impressive. And I was just going to say, maybe you didn't meet any many challenges because that model is so well developed, and it feels kind of a very confident way to approach the faculties. It makes a lot of sense, actually, what you showed us today. I was just going to share something that I'm working on now, which is an interdisciplinary module, but in the sense that we have all the students together in the same classroom. We have engineers, design students, and architecture students. And so I've recognized a lot of the issues that you brought up, and we're working hard to find commonalities that we can teach. And so the unpacking the technicality is one thing. So we have, as you advised, we looked at models and looked at how people do it in those disciplines. But I'm finding it very difficult to find commonalities when we have engineers, and we have also, this is a context where the merger of these three disciplines is not very smooth. It's not something that everybody is happy about as well. So there's a lot of tension in the team. I'm not expecting you to solve the problem, but if you have any advice on those types of commonalities that can actually make all of these disciplines happy.
So what is it that you do in that particular? It's a module, right?
It's a module called Creating Narratives, and it's a communication module, and it's interdisciplinary in the sense that we teach half for verbal skills, and we call them the visual teams. They come from design, teach the visual elements, like the visual of a poster, let's say. So we have a presentation, we have a poster as types of assessments. And the whole thing is about fitting to a different audience. So going up and down the scale of technicality. It is hard because the way they unpack technicality in engineering is different. Posters in engineering are very different from in design. So it's a bit of a it's a puzzle that is very difficult.
Are you free to choose the kind of assignments or tasks that they're supposed to do within that?
I can suggest, and they are quite open. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I was thinking of two things. One is, if you could group them, work on group projects and group them according to some similarities, then they might be able to work together and sort of, brainstorm with different perspectives on it and so on. That in itself is rich, isn't it?
Yes.
If you could record that, and that could be a study there as well. And there's lots of takeaways for them. That's one thing. The other thing is that something like sustainability or greening, something like that, conservation, these are common topics which require people from different disciplines.
Yes.
So if you could have that kind of a theme, then you can actually say that, you necessarily need a team with people from different disciplines to work together.
Yes. I thought your idea about looking at the Singapore documents on greening was fantastic. Yes, because you're right. You can come in from what an engineer would do, what a designer and what an architect possibly would do. But we've just done the pilot, and so yes, that's why I'm attending your talk to get a lot of ideas. Thank you very much.
I'm interested to know how that goes.
That we'll share more. I'll let you know. Thank you so much.
One of the things that helps me, got me along this line of research and study and so on is that I'm sure you're familiar with the WAC, the Writing Across the Curriculum, Colorado State University. It's huge. It's huge. So we actually had Mike Palmquist, who chairs the, I think, who's kind of now taken a bit of a back seat now, to come here and talk to us about it, run workshops and so on. So I was involved in organizing that. So I'm quite clued into the kind of work that they do. The writing integrated learning, the work integrated learning writing research seminar that I attended in Elon was also very helpful. And it sort of helped me to visualize what I wanted to do and so on. So it really helps to stay sort of clued into places like this, you know, what kinds of things that they do. Yeah,
I'm going to follow that up. Definitely. We went in with more of a linguistics and semiotics type of approach. So we took the samples and we looked at how the language. So we at the moment, we ended up focusing on the language strategies, you know, how from a very dense text, the speaker unpacks and brings back the agent, brings back the verbs, the actions, and so on, in order to, and definitions and so on. So we kind of looked at exactly how language-wise you unpack that technicality to fit a different audience. So we've gone kind of another direction, but we need to balance. That's what I can see as well.
Right. But that will be nice because it will give you some real, nitty-gritty information, the details,
Yeah. But it's, I mean, you said the same. It's what can we do within those few hours that we see the students. Well, thank you so much. Really useful.
Most welcome. Right. I think people are hungry.
Yes, I think unless we have any other questions, we can end the session. Anyone like to ask any final questions to Radhika? Okay, well, it's been very interesting. Thank you so much, Radhika.
Thank you for having me.
So I know quite a few colleagues are on leave, but we're recording the session. So we'll put it up on the blog and we'll let everyone know that it's available for them to see it.
Right.
And I'm sure you'll get some follow-up questions.
Sure, anytime. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And those of you who are going on leave, as I am, have a nice break. We all need it.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Radhika.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.